This podcast is brought to you by Stevie Wicks and by Molly Jewelry.
Excuse me. Yeah.
So, hi everybody. Welcome to the Your Broadway World Podcast. Today we have Evan Alexander with us, who is, are you currently in Back to the Future or?
No, so I just finished up in The Play That Goes Wrong off Broadway. I was in
Mhm,
Back to the Future last year,
mhm,
just after I left Merrily We Roll Along.
mhm. Speaking of Merrily We Roll Along, so you were, as you said, you were part of Merrily We Roll Along and then made the transition to Back to the Future. When you look back at that chapter as a whole, what did that moment represent for you career-wise?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, it was a really special time that felt like the culmination of a lot of hard work. I Right before the pandemic, I had been on tour with The Play That Goes Wrong,
Mm-hmm.
and I was playing this fantastic part, and then everything shut down, and I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't sure if I would ever get to work in theater again. I think we were all really sort of scared about what the future was going to look like when and if theaters reopened, what it would look like, how things would change, if the audiences would stay, if people would be comfortable coming back to a theater.
Mm-hmm.
And I got really lucky right as things started to open back up to land this job as a vacation cover at Little Shop of Horrors. And that was one of my favorite jobs of all time. Mostly because I loved playing Seymour so much, which was one of the
Mm-hmm.
two roles I covered there. Um, but it was a lot of hard work, and it was being a vacation cover is this kind of strange position because you feel like part of the company, but you're not there every day. Especially the first year I was there, because I was sort of in and out of that building for about 2 years. And the first year I was there, it was really kind of off and on. Like I started in September, and then I was gone for a little while because everybody was healthy, and then the Omicron strain kicked into New York City, um,
Mm-hmm.
and I was the last Seymour in the building because everybody that illness spread through the company so quickly,
Mm-hmm.
and I went from feeling like somebody who had been there very little to being this kind of integral part of the company. Anyways, all that to say, I was doing that while I was sort of going back and forth with the off-Broadway company of Merrily, and felt like I had been putting in a lot of work as an understudy. It takes a lot of discipline.
Mm-hmm.
It takes it's a lot of work. You're there for understudy rehearsals for both shows. I was there, every week. In addition to the 8 shows a week at Merrily, we were there, every opportunity we could to rehearse. So at least 2 extra days of rehearsal a week. Um, and when Back to the Future, when that opportunity came along, it just felt like the culmination of all of that hard work that
Yeah.
I had, obviously being in a position to be in Merrily We Roll Along Our Little Shop of Horrors at all was
Mm-hmm.
the culmination of another
Yeah.
series of work before the pandemic. But the opportunity to step into a principal role on Broadway, especially a role that I loved so much, that I felt had so many sort
Yeah.
of deep feelings about, it just felt incredibly special, and it felt like the universe or whatever coming out and saying you've done the work and now you get the opportunity to really shine on your own.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of Merrily We Roll Along, I think I mentioned to you that I saw I saw the pro shot because I saw the pro shot. I have not wept that hard in ages. The last show I've wept at was Jagged Little Pill,
Uh-huh.
and so I have not, cried that hard sense. And when I went to go see that, I'm like, I just like, I'm gone. I'm just gone.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
I'm so
like,
happy that it was able to get the wide release it did, and that so many people across the country, across the world, were finally able to see it because
yeah,
it was a tough show to get to see in New York, and we only ran for that
yeah,
limited amount of time. So,
yeah. Like, cause I have a tattoo of for Jagged Little Pill,
oh no way.
be, because that show meant so much to me. I love Lauren Patton and I love um Jagged Little Pill. And I love Alanis Morissette in general, so I had to get that tattoo when it closed. So I got
What
that
does your
tattoo.
tattoo say?
Besides, it's not like anybody knows who they are anyway.
Yeah.
Um, which is a line that Lauren Patton as Joe said.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
cool.
so I got that tattoo. And then after I saw the after I saw the pro shot of Merrily We Roll Along, I was talking to my friends. I was like, I think that this musical replaced Jagged Little Pill for me, and I'm gonna have to redo my tattoo for like a Merrily quote or something. Or
Yeah, you'll have multiple tattoos. Just be like a sleeve of meaningful show quotes, which I
yeah,
love.
exactly. I love that. Oh, I love that idea. I'm gonna have to take that.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a really special show. I think especially with that show in the off-Broadway company when we did it at New York Theater Workshop, I was an offstage swing and cover for Jonathan, and then when we moved to Broadway,
Mm,
they created an onstage track for two of the swings, and so I was bumped into the ensemble there. But especially off Broadway, it was this incredible opportunity to just sit back and watch this like brilliant company,
mm,
and to sort of be such a lucky fly on the wall for that process. It was such a
mm,
huge learning experience, and so massively informative. I felt really lucky just to get to watch them create that
mm,
production, and to see the heart and soul that Maria, our director, and Jonathan and Dan and Lindsay all put into it. It was really really special to watch.
mm. So then, speaking of you understanding, what did that experience teach you about preparation, patience, and trusting timing?
Oh gosh, yeah. I mean, in terms of patience and trusting timing, I mean, a lot of it goes back to I think what I was saying earlier of like I think you never know when the time to step into a role, a larger role in the business may come, but I think it's about making sure that you're ready to meet that moment. And I think Merrily taught me a lot about how to prepare, and especially watching Jonathan and Dan and Lindsay taught me a lot about not just what it means to be a brilliant performer, but also to be a company leader, what it means to be kind to people and generous, and to lead not only with your talent, but with your heart and with your generosity, how to treat everybody in the building with respect, and how to uh, how to make a room better by being in it. Um, I think that was the biggest takeaway for me from that show. Um, and it's what I think really helped me going into Back to the Future, again, stepping into, a leading role in that company. I felt, as you said, I felt like my patience had paid off. The timing was right. And because it didn't happen for me right away, because it was 15 years into my career, it felt like I had all of the tools and skills I needed to be successful as a company member and as an actor in that show. Um, and I think it felt like every step I'd taken towards that job had perfectly prepared me for it.
Mm,
And I think if I had rushed into that position, if it was something that had happened to me when I was 20, I think it would have been probably just a very different experience necessarily. So,
mm. And then I also wanted to ask too, because with how Back to the Future the musical is, and then and then also how Merrily We Roll Along is. Merrily We Roll Along kind of goes from like the end of everything that happened, and it goes like backwards into them first meeting and stuff.
Yeah.
So how did you like how were you able to like transition like through for like like a from that to back to the future where everything's like forward?
Yeah. I mean, I guess I'd never done a play before Merrily. I'd never done a play that happens in reverse chronological order like that. So I Merrily was the kind of exception. I was used to telling these stories from
Yeah.
beginning to end on the timeline, and Merrily was the first time I'd told it in the reverse. The only other show I can think of like that I sort of loved growing up was like The Last 5 Years, where you
Yeah.
have two characters, one from the beginning to the end and one from the end to the beginning. Um, and so, ooh, I'm ripping out an earpiece here. I think my familiarity, especially with The Last 5 Years as a young actor, sort of set me up for this idea that the idea of working out of order in that way,
Yeah.
starting from one place. And I think at the end of the day, it's not all that different in terms of the way that you express emotions. It's just the polarity are different. Starting from the end to the beginning is still a journey, and I think it's just ensuring that as we think about playing the characters and as we investigate the journey, just understanding what that is, where they start and where they end.
Hmm.
Um, and it's just a different sort of start and end point for each of
Hmm.
them.
So then I have a little fun question for you too.
Yeah.
Um, what's your favorite song in each production that you were in?
In Merrily and in Back to the Future
Yeah, and a Little Shop of Horrors too.
and Little Shop of Horrors. I'll start with Merrily. My favorite song in Merrily, oh gosh. I think my favorite song was Growing Up, which is the song that Frank sings in like the middle of the first act. Um, it was the audition song when I was auditioning for it. Um, and I think for where I was in my life at that time, it just really struck out a chord with me. I remember too hearing when we did the off-Broadway production and then there was a break and then we moved to Broadway and we had a sitz probe for the Broadway production and we had no string section off
Hmm.
Broadway and we added a string section for Broadway. And I remember when I first heard those strings come in when Jonathan was singing the song at the sitz probe. The sitz probe is our first rehearsal with the
Hmm.
orchestra, with the musicians, because usually we just rehearse with a piano. When I first heard the string section come in, I remember bawling. And part of it was that I had lost my dad that past spring. And a lot of that song really resonated. It's a song about love and relationships and growing.
Hmm.
And I felt like so much of the year previous with losing
Hmm.
my dad and experiencing growing up in that way, it really struck a chord with me. And so every time I sang that song in rehearsal, and then eventually when I got to do the show as Frank, I got to do it one time. I found it incredibly moving. But also Our Time, which is the song that the
Hmm.
three of the sort of main actors sing at the end of the show. Um, I again, deeply emotionally affected by.
Yeah.
I think Franklin Shepherd Inc. is like an incredible musical theater patter song
Yeah.
that does this incredible job of being comedic and moving the story, and just everything that it does, I think, is brilliant. All of the music in that show, I think it's. Hopefully, this production has brought Merrily into the consciousness in a way that it hasn't been, but I think it's just such an underrated musical in turn. It's so well written.
Yeah.
Um, Little Shop of Horrors. Oh gosh, I again, Seymour is like one of my favorite roles I've ever played. So picking
Mm.
one song, I think, is like, how do you do it? I
Choosing your
love,
favorite child.
yeah, exactly. I like every night. I really loved singing "The Meek Shall Inherit." Weirdly,
Yeah.
it feels like a weird choice for that, but like, uh, that song I think is one of the most perfect musical theater songs written. When we talk about a
Yeah.
journey, getting Seymour from the beginning of that song, dealing with this whole moral dilemma of what he's going to
Mm.
do with this plant. I loved doing that every night, and I really looked forward to it. But obviously, like Suddenly Seymour is like one of the best songs of all
Yeah.
time, and the opening number, God, I loved singing that opening number. Um, I still cry when I listen to it on the
Yeah.
soundtrack. Um, Back to the Future, My Myopia, it was the song that George sings. And I remember again from the first time I heard it on the cast album while I was getting ready to audition, just feeling this emotional connection to it.
Mm.
I thought it was just this beautiful love song. And I think um, they did this really great job of the flip that it does in the middle and turning it into it starts as this very sort of sincere love song and then turns into this sort of really wonderful, like performative celebration of love.
Mm.
Um, and that's what it always was for me. I think different Georges
Yeah.
may have different interpretations of what that moment is
Mm.
and, how comedic or not comedic it should be. But
Mm.
it was his, for me, it was his I Want song.
Mm.
It was all about love. So that was my favorite in that musical. Yeah, I guess that's the three of them.
Yeah. Uh, I have to say though, Franklin Shepherd dying had me just dying, laughing so hard I couldn't breathe. I was laughing so hard, like it was
Yeah.
just so funny. And
Yeah.
Daniel Radcliffe, let me tell you, Daniel Radcliffe sells it geniusly, and I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. It was amazing watching him put it together.
Yeah.
Off Broadway. Again, like just watching the creation of each of those moments, from the inception um to what was on Broadway is it was so cool to watch. And that show that number brought down the house every night. It was the audience went insane.
Mhm.
Yeah, he was fantastic.
Okay, so then speaking of Back to the Future, I'm gonna dive into some questions about Back to the Future.
Sure.
What initially drew you to Back to the Future, and what excited you most about joining that company?
Oh man, so Back to the Future was like one of those movies for me. I was, I guess, a child mostly of the '90s, but I was born in the late '80s. And so that movie it's one of those movies that was on TV like every weekend. Like growing up, it was on, TBS, I guess it would have been.
Mm-hmm.
It was one of it was just like now it's Goodfellas, weirdly. That is, if you flip the channels on cable, it's like always on a network somewhere. Back to the Future was that movie growing up. It was always on TV, and if it wasn't on TV, we had it playing on VHS. It was just a movie that I grew up loving, and I watched it with my dad, and it was like always part of my cultural sort of center. And then I found out that they had adapted it into a musical and that it was going to be coming to Broadway.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, I was doing Little Shop of Horrors. And Seymour and George, I think, share a lot of the same. George McFly, the character I played in Back to the Future, and Seymour share a lot of the same kind of DNA, I think. Um, and I thought, oh, this is perfect. I've been playing this role for a year now, off and on. And then I found out that Hugh Coles, who had done it in the UK, was going to be coming over to Broadway. And I went, darn it. And Hugh was brilliant, and
Yeah.
he's fantastic. But I remember sort of earmarking it in my brain and thinking, um, I should check again in a year, um, because that's typically when contracts renew and people move on. And then I kind of forgot about it. And my agent gave me a call, sure enough, about a year after it had opened on Broadway and said, they're going to be looking for a replacement and they'd like you to come in and audition. I'd worked with John Rando, the director,
Mm-hmm.
on a musical called The Toxic Avenger. It was the first big musical I did out of college in Toronto, in 2009. Um, and so I had a relationship with him. We hadn't, it'd been a long time since we connected, but when I, went and saw him in the room as I was auditioning, it was really nice to catch back up and we felt like we had this sort of artistic working relationship already sorted out. And so, yeah, I got really lucky to get that job, and it again, it felt these kind of like underdog characters, these like vulnerable people. I don't it's what I tend to connect with most easily. I was picked on a lot as a kid. I wasn't like I was a theater kid. I wasn't like a popular jock guy, and a lot of that informed, I guess, the roles that I started to connect with as I got older. So
Mm.
the sort of combination of it being this special movie for me growing up, and then also being the kind of role that I tend to jive with most, it just sort of
Mm.
felt like the perfect combination.
So like you said, you played George McFly, right?
Yeah,
So please tell me that they kept the line "my d density."
yeah,
Thank
yeah,
God. Oh, that's like my favorite line of the whole Back to the Future franchise. That's my favorite line for some reason.
yeah. I love that bit. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
super fun. We
Yeah.
got to have a lot of fun with it on stage too.
Hmm.
And it's, with that show too, it was really fun because people, the sort of big Back to the Future fans, there are these moments that just like that they want to see how we're going to deliver it on
Yeah.
stage. And so those bits would get reactions, they'd get applause, those favorite movie moments. The
Yeah.
audiences really loved them. Yeah, no, I loved my density.
And then the 21 gigawatts or whatever.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was all
Two,
there.
yeah, two iconic things. And I don't know which production this was, but I heard that Roger Bart played Doc.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Roger Bart originated it in the UK when it had its first production, and then came
Hmm.
over to Broadway with it,
Hmm.
and did it with us the whole time. He was there
Hmm.
from opening to closing, and then I think went to Australia to do it there this past year, and opened the first company of it over there. So yeah, he's incredible. I mean, he inhabits that role so beautifully with such comedic mastery. Um, Incredible energy. I have no
Hmm.
idea how he does it. Yeah, he was brilliant. I loved working with
I
Roger.
mean, I've been a fan of his since I was a child. Like
Yeah.
Hercules, come on.
Oh gosh, yeah, we did a Broadway Cares fundraiser in the fall last year, and one of the sort of prizes we did an auction, which we sometimes
Hmm.
do with Broadway Cares, and we raised enough money to get Roger to sing "Go the Distance" from Hercules
I
live.
saw that video. I
Yeah.
saw that video. I
And
was
we were
like,
all
oh
just sitting around,
my
just
God.
like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God.
I saw that video. I saw that on YouTube and I was like, oh my God.
Yeah,
I lost my mind. I was like, Roger Bart is singing Hercules. Oh my God. Hercules is singing Hercules. Oh my God.
yeah, yeah. No, it was so cool. It was definitely one of those pinch me moments,
Yeah.
where I think we all sort of idealize what it means to be on Broadway and what it means to make a career in theater and to work with your idols. But then to have a moment like that where you're, watching the guy do the thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was really special.
Well, I just assume the like in any production on any show, there's always that moment of like you can watch the guy do the thing or watch the person do the thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, totally. I think especially early on, you tend to
Yeah.
have those like, how did I get here? What is
Yeah.
happening? What is my life? This is
Yeah.
beyond my wildest dreams. I mean, and certainly I hope that we all who are the people who are lucky enough to do this for a living, I hope that we allow ourselves to have those moments because I think it can be really easy for people to start to get jaded or tired and to start to take things for granted and to lose that sense of gratitude and that sense of awe. And I think that's the thing I always try to express to young people who have been lucky enough to get to start working professionally at a high level is to never forget what it means to be grateful, and to really remember how lucky and how privileged we are, to be where we are doing what we're doing. It's an incredibly fortunate thing.
So then, how does performing in a show with such an iconic legacy compare to working on a more intimate, character-driven place like Merrily?
I think in terms of the experience of doing them, honestly, very similar. I think the approach is the same no matter what. Connecting with the characters, telling the story. I think there are some sort of demands, that come with doing a show like Back to the Future, where there is a culture built around it already. You know, certainly in our approach to the characters, we were encouraged to find our own takes on them, but at the same time, we do have to pay homage to the characterizations that made the movie so successful. People want to come and see the characters that they fell in love with on screen. So I think if we were just doing bad impressions, people wouldn't love that. I think that would be like a I think it would just feel cheap. I think people want to see great actors inhabit these roles, but they also want to feel like they are getting that experience again, like they're watching the movie live in front of them.
Yeah.
And so it was about, when I was playing George, I did very specific things like really worked on finding his voice.
Yeah.
Crispin Glover in that character had a kind of lateral lisp. So he sort of he talked like this. A lot of his S sounds were like this. And so it was locking into little physical things, little vocal
Yeah.
mannerisms, so that as people were watching, they felt that nostalgia. They felt like they were having the experience they had when they first watched the movie. But also, I have to bring Evan to it. Because if I don't, again, they could stay home and watch the movie. They're coming to have this unique experience on stage. And so it's a little bit of this sort of chemistry, this, mix. Whereas, when you're doing a show like Little Shop of Horrors or Merrily We Roll Along, the kind of emphasis is on finding the uniqueness of our own personal takes. Because again, people have seen Merrily We Roll Along. People have seen Little Shop of Horrors in their high school, in their community theater, on the movie with Rick Moranis. They don't, they want to see somebody bring something new to it. Whereas a show that is based on existing IP, I think they're looking for a little bit of that thing that made them fall in love with it in the first place. They want to have that, ah, shucks recognition of, I remember that moment. He's doing the thing.
Mm.
George has a very specific laugh when he's old man George. It's an um, and when I would go to the stage door after the show, people would be like, "Do the laugh again, do the laugh." You don't get that with Merrily We Roll Along.
Yeah.
But you do, when you have an iconic franchise like this, people come to expect those moments and really appreciate when you give it to them.
Speaking of, actually, since we're looking back and everything, so looking back, how did your time with Merrily help prepare you for where you are now?
That's a great question. Um, I think it taught me a lot about what I'm capable of. It, again, it required me to do more work than I've ever had to do in my life as a performer. Not only was I understudying Jonathan, the leading man, I was also a swing.
Mm.
So I was learning 5 ensemble tracks. And in this show, it was a little bit different than how it is in more traditional musicals. There wasn't
Mm.
very much choreography per se. It was a lot of stage movement. Like the opening scene, that Frank is all of these characters at a party. And so where whereas in a traditional sort of dancing ensemble, you might learn for a musical number all of the choreography on the right side of the stage and all the choreography on the left side of the stage, and it's more or less the same, but you're beckoning with your right hand versus
Mm.
your left hand. In this show, you're learning kind of 10 different principal, or sorry, 5 different principal tracks, because it's about, okay, I have this conversation with Vishal, and then I cross the stage, and then Christian and I are going to have this discussion about how I do this. And then, so it requires a lot more kind of specificity and a lot more to keep in your head, a lot of different movement patterns. So it was incredibly difficult and incredibly rigorous, which is why we had to have so much rehearsal for that show. Typically, on a Broadway show or any sort of show with understudies, you'll start understudy rehearsal as soon as possible after opening, and you'll get everybody put into their respective roles or roles for principals or tracks for ensemble members. And that all is usually able to sort of be accomplished within about 3 months. But with this show, we were in rehearsal the entire time from our opening in September through to our closing in July. Or I left in June to do Back to the Future, but when they closed in July, there wasn't a week where we didn't have understudy rehearsal just because it was
Mm.
so um, there was so much internal coverage and there were so many different individual things to plan out. So it was a lot of work. And I think it really just taught me grace. It prepared me to be somebody who can work hard and still have a good attitude, to not be, to not allow the burden of that hard work to impact my professionalism or my courteousness, or my gratitude. That was the main thing with Merrily, certainly.
Mm. Was there a recent moment where you felt the eternal shift of, okay, I belong here?
I think definitely Back to the Future was a big part of that, of just feeling like I think I was really lucky. I grew up in Canada. I went to school in Canada. And right after I graduated college in Canada, I landed this lead role in The
Mm.
Toxic Avenger, which I mentioned earlier with John Rando, the director of Back to the Future. That was this like pinch me moment of I didn't think this was something that would ever be possible for me. And we opened and closed pretty quickly. That show did not
Mm.
have a commercially successful run in Toronto, which was a shame because it was one of the best things I've ever done. And but about 5 months after we closed, I found out I was nominated for what's called the Dora Award in
Mm.
Toronto, which is, Toronto's closest approximation to like a Tony Award. It's the big theater awards in Canada, for my performance in that show. And I felt like I was really riding high. And then when I moved to New York, about 2 years after that, I really kind of had to
Mm.
start at the beginning again. I really had to start over.
Mm.
And certainly my work in Canada and some of the connections I'd made there gave me a little bit of a leg up. I wasn't starting from zero. Like I said, I had that relationship with John Rando that eventually led to Back to the Future. But I really had to do the work of a journeyman actor from the beginning again. And Back to the Future was that sort of moment of it felt like the 10 or 11 years I'd spent starting over. It felt like I had finally gotten to that place um of feeling not that I had arrived. That's, that sounds silly and whatever, but it felt like okay, all of the work I did after the early success I have, I feel like I've finally arrived at this place where I'm being recognized for the work that I'm doing, and celebrated for it, which felt really special and validating. But again, like I said, I think it's important for all actors, young and old, to remember that any success in this business is kismet and is unbelievably lucky. It takes an absurd degree of luck and good timing to be able to do any of the kind of work that I've been so lucky to get to do for the past 10 years. What I probably would tell my younger self is that any moment where I get to walk out on a stage and there are people in the audience and there's somebody writing a paycheck for me, those are all those I'm here, I have made it moments.
Mm.
There are big ones, there are small ones, there are more public, there are less public. But I think yeah, any opportunity that I get to do what I love and make a living from it, I think is incredibly sort of lucky and validating. And I do my best to remember that.
You will not believe how this ring changes color right on your hand. Seriously, by day it's a dreamy green, and by night, suddenly deep red. Alexandrite is rarer than diamonds, but with Molly Jewelry's lapstones, I actually got this magical look without dropping a fortune. The stone totally stands out, and you can pick your fave shape and metal. It's a lucky little transformation piece, so special for gifts or just yourself. Which cut would you choose? Drop a comment and let's obsess together.
Uh, do you have like a quiet win from the past year that you're especially proud of, even if it didn't make a headline?
Um, I mean, in terms of a quiet win, I think I felt really lucky to get asked back to the off-Broadway company of The Play That Goes Wrong. I did that show before the pandemic. Our leg of the tour closed in 2019, and I remember feeling, the thing about that show is that it's everybody loves doing The Play That Goes Wrong. It's a really fun show to do. And it's a really great job to have in New York City. And so a lot of the people who get that job stay in that job for as long as they feel like they can. And I felt incredibly lucky that there were two openings this past year for me to return to cover a couple of different sets of leaves. And I remember thinking that it was very kind of them to ask me to return. It had been so long since I'd done the show, and for me, it felt very personally validating, just in terms of all the work that I had done on
Mm-hmm.
tour. Knowing that it had been seen and appreciated,
Mm-hmm.
and that I was going to have the opportunity to do it at home now. So that definitely was a big win. And it was so lovely to be welcomed into the family over that is that company at New World Stages. They are such a tight-knit group. They are all incredible people. And yeah, a massive win just to go and step back in there. Certainly, things that are a little more public. I've been able to do more film and television work this past year, which had always been a goal of mine. And the work that I'd gotten to do in that in the last year was I felt very lucky. Those were big wins. Um, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's what I'd say.
Um, do you have any pre-show rituals or backstage traditions?
Yeah, I what I will say is I try not to have anything that I feel like I have to rigidly stick with, because
Mm-hmm.
inevitably something happens and it throws the ritual off. And
Mm-hmm.
then if you've over ritualized that moment and it
Yeah.
feels like the ritual has been ruined, that you're predestined to have a terrible show.
Mm-hmm.
So I try not to do anything. I can't, I try to think of things that I used to do when I was younger. I had to do this very specific warm up in the shower before I went on for Seymour, that worked through my entire register. I had to, and then, if I didn't have the time to do that warm up, I really was nervous about my voice the whole show. I made sure that when I moved on to Merrily, that I de-ritualized a lot of that and focused on doing what I needed to be ready for the show
Mm-hmm.
and nothing more. But there are also things like I used to there were like very specific dinners I would get on two show days
Mm-hmm.
because I knew it made me feel good. Like those kinds of things, I guess, are less ritual and more self-care that works for the performance. And those things I do. But there's silly little things at like the play that goes wrong. There's an entrance that the characters Robert and Dennis and Chris Bean all make in the second act. And we had this very intense sequence of secret handshakes and high fives and this time guessing game. We had to do all three before we got out for that entrance. Those things are just fun actor things. Like it's this
Mm-hmm.
sort of game we'd play. But if we didn't do them, it was like, I think there are rituals that are baked into the experience of doing a lot of these shows. At Little Shop of Horrors, whoever played Seymour in the middle of the second act, um, there's a song where Audrey, I think it's called Somonex, but she's singing with Audrey too, the plant. And it's this really like kick-ass rock bit.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the person playing Seymour in that moment is backstage getting a sip of water with their dresser and being handed a prop. And you have to have a dance party. If you don't have the dance party, it feels like you're not doing the track properly. And so
Mm-hmm.
every time we would train a new Seymour, we would say, you make sure you go and you find Sean the dresser and you do your dance party. It's very important. That kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But I try not to have anything that is, in terms of like if I'm being realistic, I try not to have too much that's integral to
Mm-hmm.
my performance, um, unless it's absolutely necessary, because I don't want to be, I'm somebody who is generally quite superstitious, and I don't want to give myself another reason to get into my head about doing or not doing
Right.
something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is a really, really fun question. If you could jump into a DeLorean and visit any moment in your own career so far, which would it be and why?
Oh gosh. I mean, I guess there's two. I think the first would be like going back to the Toxic Avenger. That was like such an incredible, special time in my life, and I loved doing that show. And it was my first sort of taste of what it meant to be a professional actor. And
Mm-hmm.
I do think at that time I really did appreciate what was happening
Mm-hmm.
around me. I really did understand how special it was, and I think that would be a really special moment to experience again. watching my dad, now that he's passed, watching my dad, the way that he loved that show, seeing him in the audience. I think about my wife and I met doing a show together, revisiting that time, falling in love with her for the first time again, doing a show together. I think I would love to revisit that. But I think each of the shows that I've done, there are special memories from all of them that, I think, I would love to go back to that one day at Little Shop of Horrors where this, and that happened. I would love to go to Merrily We Roll Along and stand on stage at the end of the final number after our time. I cried like a baby, and the audience was out there, and I just remember feeling full body chills in a way that I've never experienced on stage. To have that experience again, that'll never happen again in that way, but it was such a special moment that I'm sure I would love to relive. Stuff like that.
Yeah. And I think too, you were speaking about the full body chills, and I think if you don't get that, then you're doing the wrong show or you're doing something wrong. If
Yeah.
you get that, then you know that you did like the perfect, like the right show, and you aced it.
Yeah. I mean, I think that was the thing that with that show specifically, I think what Jonathan and Maria sort of conceived of so beautifully was this version of Franklin Shepherd who people really connected with. And I think it was because
Mhm.
Jonathan and Maria really connected with him.
Yeah.
You can say that I think there have been different things I've read about Jonathan's performance as like he was incredibly charming
Mhm.
and empathetic. But again, I think that comes so much from Jonathan's soul.
Mhm.
And again, how much of himself he was willing to pour into that, and how much
Mhm.
of his heart he was able to put into it. And I followed that example
Mhm.
when I went on, and it was sort of the key to unlocking that role was finding a way to connect with him emotionally, and that's where those chills come from. Is really just like I have connected with this thing. I have
Mhm.
found the way in. I have brought my own soul to it. I've poured my heart into it, and now the curtain is coming down, and I've lived this full life on stage.
Yeah. Yep. Um, See, and then also, this is really funny, but like as I was watching the pro shot, like I mentioned before, like as I was watching the pro shot, I love Jonathan Groff, but like every time that he sings now or like does anything, all I can picture is Kristoff from Frozen. That's all I can picture because he's Kristoff.
He is Christoph, and he was brilliant. We had a little shop of horrors. I did the Jonathan had already left the show by the time I
Yeah.
got there. It was Jeremy Jordan had taken over at that point, but we had a giant Christoph doll in the dressing room that was a leftover from the time he'd been there,
Mm.
that sort of watched over all of us.
I just had to mention that because I was just like, I want to love, I love him. I love him dearly, but like also you can't help but to hear that.
Yeah.
So then, what's the dream role or type of project that you'd love to tackle next?
Oh man. I'd love to work on it's the most cliche actor answer, but I'd love to work on something new again. Working on Merrily actually weirdly felt it was a revival, but it really felt like we were reinvestigating it, or sort of or starting fresh with it in some way. We were trying to make it feel like it was something new.
Mhm.
And Back to the Future was new, but I joined as a replacement. Amazing Grace was my first Broadway show, and there was something really special about coming in every day and it being different. About watching the sort of collaborative process of building this thing from scratch, that I really sort of ache for again. I
Mhm.
love being part of the process of creating something totally fresh, and certainly I haven't had the opportunity to do that as a principal on Broadway, so that would be the sort of the next thing I would love to do is to if there's a
Mhm.
project that I was really right for, that I loved, that I was lucky enough to do from the beginning, and really be
Mhm.
able to put my DNA in it. That would be the goal. In terms of a revival, I love Sunday in the Park with George. It's one of my favorite shows, and I've always wanted to play George. So add it to my career Georges.
Mhm. So then, what advice would you give to performers who are currently understudying and waiting for their next big step?
It's a great question. I would say put in the work. I remember when we were off Broadway at New York Theater Workshop, our choreographer Tim, who was the director of Two Strangers Carry a Cake this season, I'd been standing at the back of the theater, making notes during one of the shows, and he found me after the performance, and he pulled me aside, and he said, "I just want to let you know how much we all appreciate how hard you're working, and that we see it, and we acknowledge it, and we're grateful for it." And that meant the world to me. And I would say to any understudy that that's, the highest praise you can get. And I think what we all should be working towards is just really making sure that you're doing the work, and being a dependable company member. And I know it can be really hard standing in the wings waiting for your opportunity. But when you meet that opportunity, when it's your time and you're ready and you feel comfortable and everybody around you feels comfortable because they know how dedicated you've been to really taking on the task, it can be an incredible experience. And there's nothing like being on stage with somebody when you've been doing the show for 6 months, being on stage with somebody who is experiencing that show in those shoes for the first time, when they're super prepared and really able to just focus on telling the story and being in the show, and bringing themselves. It's such a special experience. Part of the job of being an understudy is making everybody else comfortable, which is a weird thing, and maybe not the the sort of like most kumbaya feeling, I guess. A lot of it is about helping other people feel confident in your ability to do the job when you are called to do it. So it's always been my aspiration, because I've understudied a handful of times now. It's always been my aspiration to be ready to play the part by the first public performance, which means really watching them in rehearsal, really getting off book, um, ideally before the process even begins, which our union does not like. But I really think as much work as you can do to be prepared before you need to be, it can only set you up for success. And it happens all the time that somebody ends up having to miss the second preview because they get sick, and that's before understudies have had the chance to rehearse. So you need to do what you need to do to be ready to go on, even if you've had no rehearsal. And that's when those magical theater stories happen. Sutton Foster stepping in for Thoroughly Modern Millie, in They're Out of Town. That happens because she was an incredibly talented performer who had done an incredible amount of hard work, who was ready to meet the moment when it came. And I'd say that's what any understudy should be prepared for.
As the artist you're becoming right now, what do you hope the audience take away from your work?
Oh gosh, that's a great question. My goal, especially in recent years, has been as much as I can to be a real living, breathing human being, to not shy away um, from being vulnerable and wearing my heart on my sleeve on stage. I've played wild character roles, and I've played, very sort of real people roles. And my approach to all of them, I think, um, is to have them feel rooted in reality, that they could be real, living, breathing people. I think that was something that was really important to me with George McFly in Back to the Future, that you know, especially the sort of form that it took on in the musical, it can go in a bunch of crazy ways. It can be a really fun, heightened, big character performance, and there are certainly moments in the show where that's required. But he can also really be a real, living, breathing, human, vulnerable, um, love-struck young man. And it was really important to me to find that balance and to bring as much humanity to him as I could. And I think that's what I hope to do with any role I play, is bring the humanity, bring the vulnerability. I remember Maria Friedman, our director at Merrily We Roll Along, was watching understudy rehearsal one day, and she said, vulnerability is your superhero, is your superpower. And with great power comes great responsibility. I think you can lean in too much to it. But it's something that has always been very easily accessible for me.
Mhm.
And that's what I try to bring to a lot of the work I do is real,
Mhm.
human, vulnerable people.
Mhm. So then, speaking of all that, like, what keeps you grounded and excited in an industry that can be so unpredictable?
Good question. I love what I do, and I think hard times, good times. I remember that I am one of the lucky people who has so far, again, I think we keep coming back to this, and I'm sorry if it sounds like I'm beating a dead horse, but um, I just try to be grateful and remember how lucky I am to have gotten to do this so
Mhm.
much. I think certainly like that's the hardest part about being an actor is not knowing what comes next.
Mhm.
But it's also kind of one of the most exciting things is like the world is full of possibilities. And used to talk about this a lot when I first moved from Canada. I remember in Canada has an incredible art scene. There, especially now, there's so much more filming in Toronto than there was when I was growing up. But in terms of commercial theater, it's really ebbed and flowed in Toronto, where I'm from. And a lot of the work is in regional theater in Canada. There are two big theater festivals, the Shaw Festival and the Stratford Festival. There are incredible regional theaters across the country. And it felt like I remember, and I'm sure this has changed. I haven't lived in Canada for over 10 years. But I remember at the time that I was there, it really felt like there were these audition cycles where, it would get really busy in September and it would get really busy in January. And if you didn't get a job in that time, it felt a little bit like, oh, well, I guess I have to wait till next year before I can book a job again. And that is true to various degrees. I'm sure other people would have wildly different perspectives on that. But I remember when I moved to New York, I was really lucky to find an agent right away. And there was this feeling I had that if I didn't book that job, that there was always
Mhm.
another audition to go to. There was always something around the corner.
Mhm.
And I find that, yeah, really invigorating. It doesn't, it can feel discouraging sometimes. It can feel hard sometimes, but it never feels hopeless.
Mhm.
There's so much possibility. There's so much beautiful work being done by so many people in so many different parts of the country.
Mhm.
And I'm always excited about what opportunity might come that I totally wasn't expecting. What might come
Mhm.
totally out of left field.
Mhm.
Um, yeah. And that's been a lot of my career is just like, I can't believe that the phone is ringing from this company or for this show or,
Mhm.
um, yeah.
Mhm. So then, for our listeners, where can we find you?
I'm on Instagram at I am Evan Smith. I have a website, www.evanalexandersmith.com, which I try to update sometimes, but I think I'm most active on Instagram. I have a TikTok, but that's really just for me to watch dog videos. Yeah, probably Instagram at I am Evan Smith.
Mhm. Okay. Oh, see, kids, actors, they're just like us. They watch dog videos too.
Yeah,
Well, thank you for so much for coming on.
of course, it was my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And I'm glad that we finally found each other. It was weird that my email did that.
Yeah, I think it was Wix. I think it was the back end, whatever system they have through the communication forms. I'd had a weird experience with somebody right around the time where you had also gotten in touch with me. I think
Yeah,
it might have been a momentary glitch, but it
maybe.
had your email listed wrong, and I think it was like an input field thing.
Okay.
Um, but I'm glad this all worked out.
Me too.
Yeah.
Um, so yep, I will put his links down below and I will have my links down below. And with that being said, we are off. And I will see you Eternal Stars later. Bye guys.